And thank you to our online audience. We hope you're hearing us well and really appreciate everybody checking in who did not have the ability to be here in person.
So with that, real quickly, we're kind of going to forego a big, long introduction of our panelists. However, I think it's important to recognize everyone who is here. Fernandez is here. Oh, and by the way, just backing up for a second, counselors are going to kind of do the majority of the speaking, and then staff will also jump in where needed. So just wanted to make sure that everyone's on the same page with that. So just going down, we have the chief here. Good morning. How are you? Morning. Kristin Retherford, of course, and then on the counselors to my left, your right, Councilor Gonzalez, Councilor Stapleton, and Mayor-elect Hoy. So with that, I believe Mayor-elect Hoy is going to be Chris. That makes me. I'm a first name guy.
Yeah, Chris.
More than I am last name guy. So Chris, please.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning at this very early hour. I always appreciate meeting at 7 a.m. My sense of humor is still in bed. So, so today we're going to talk to you a little bit about what's happening with the bond. We've gone through a lengthy process to get where we are today. And so the project list is finalized. You all should have a one-pager in front of you that will kind of, I'll follow along kind of with that this morning. So you'll have a point there if you need it. So this is a $300 million bond package that'll be on the November ballot. And one of the key features of this bond is that it's going to roll on incrementally. So as other things roll off of the tax rolls, this will roll on incrementally. So your tax rate will not change. So as the library seismic upgrade rolls off, the police station and other things roll off, we'll roll on pieces of this. So this $300 million won't be available to us all. It'll be incremental over the course of 10 years. So that's a really key feature. So again, your tax rate would not change over the course of this bond. And Josh Eggleston online, he'll be able to talk more about that in detail. To get to this point, we really had a strong community engagement process. Staff reached out to the neighborhood associations, to civic groups, to all sorts of folks, to our boards and commissions, and really got a lot of input and testimony. And then we had a bond steering committee that took all of that input, also took public testimony, and made a recommendation to the entire council. And the entire council supported this final proposal unanimously. So that's something that's important to know, is that where we are has unanimous support from the entire council. So to kind of get into the weeds a little bit, because I think that's what people really want to know about. The scope of the projects that we're looking at. So there's $157 million out of the 300 for streets and sidewalks. So over half of this bond is for streets and sidewalks. And I think it's one thing it's interesting to compare to. Remember back in 2008, the last time we had a bond, that was a $100 million bond focused completely on roads and bridges. So this is 157 million out of the 300 would be for that same purpose. Some of the highlighted projects, and we can go into as much detail as you want in questions and answers about the various wards, various areas of town, various projects, but I'm just going to give it kind of an overview. So the one road or the one project that we're going to build from scratch, Drive. That's one of the projects that came out of our congestion task force several years ago, where we want to help the folks over in West Salem. Marine Drive essentially runs between Wallace Road and Wallace Marine Park. It sort of connects those apartments there up to the business area, Roth's in that area. So it will give some nice local relief. So folks in that area don't have to go onto Wallace Road to get to the grocery store, to the post office, that sort of thing. So we have been acquiring right of way for that project for some time, with money left over from the 2008 bond. And so we've been working kind of quietly getting ready for this. So we have a bunch of the right of way already acquired over there. So that's a brand new road that will be built. It's a phased project. We won't be doing the entire Marine Drive, but we'll be doing the first phase of that. And then also we have some significant projects on Battle Creek, on Browning, out on Davis Road, if you're familiar with that, out by the middle school out there, which is it's a huge across the middle school, is, it has had a lot of building and stuff going on in the past several years, and with a lot of issues out there on Davis Road. Also Dokes Ferry, Fisher Road over, in Northeast Salem, McGilchrist, River Road, and then also on Sunnyview Road. And those are all, and Peter can go into detail on if you want to know like what we're talking about when we say talking about those particular projects, but these are major upgrades to some areas of those roads. Like for instance, Fisher Road out in my ward would get, it's one of those roads that was annexed into the city, but has never been brought up to standard. So it's really highly traveled with lots of pedestrians, has no sidewalks, has nothing. It just has pavement and then ditches. And so it's a really in significant need of some upgrades. So, and like I said, Peter will be happy to talk more in detail about any of those projects. But I want to move along. So the next part of this is $40 million for the fire department, which includes $26 million to replace the entire fleet. Our entire fire fleet is overdue for replacement. It's about 15 years old, and so it's ready to be replaced. So $26 million for equipment, $14 million for 2 new fire stations. The chief tells us that we need 2 new stations to help with response times. I believe they're generally slated for Northeast and South Salem to help with response times in those areas. So that would acquire the land and build the stations. And then $28.4 million for park upgrades throughout the entire city. And again, we can go into as much detail as you like about that. There's a variety of upgrades throughout the city. We tried to get the entire city involved in this bond in terms of projects. So there are things like structural upgrades, bathrooms, gazebos, and various things throughout the city that various courts, pickleball courts, I know is a huge thing these days, other resurfacing, that sort of thing. And that would be upgraded. Those would all be upgraded in this bond. Also included is $7.5 million for site development for 2 branch libraries and affordable housing. And we're looking at co-locating some in some mixed use with say a branch library on the ground floor and then affordable housing up above. I think that's a really great opportunity. We've seen that happen in other cities, and we think that would be a really great thing. We only have 1 branch library currently. It's in West Salem. For instance, out in my area, it's 5 miles to the library, and you have to cross Lancaster and I-5 to get there. No kid can get to the library on their own, from my word, for sure. Also, there's about $10 million there for affordable housing, and what this will provide is gap funding for private and public developers who are building affordable housing. Oftentimes, what we're seeing is that there are developers who want to get affordable housing, but it just doesn't pencil out without incentives. And so this $10 million would help with that gap between that folks need to be able to pencil out those projects. We have a lot of different levers that we can pull in the city, but only in certain areas. A lot of times it's in a certain geographical area. You have to be in an urban rural area. You have to be, a variety of, you have to be in the core, different things. But this would give us an opportunity to help incentivize development all over town. It wouldn't be geographically restricted, which I think is a really, really important thing. Because we're seeing a lot of developers who want to do that, to develop, but they just can't because it doesn't pencil without some help. And this would give to do that. Also, $17.6 million for technology and cybersecurity. We have some significantly aging electronic infrastructure in the city we're very vulnerable to cyber attack, and this would help upgrade a lot of those systems to bring us more into the 21st century, to allow us to continue to operate, fend off any of those cyber attacks and that sort of thing. I'm sure that staff could talk more about the detail of that, but just know that we're working on some of our systems that are 20, 30 years old. It's we just have not been able to keep up with that in terms with the general funds for that sort of infusion to do a significant upgrade in technology. And the last part of this bond is 39.5 million for a seismic upgrade of the Civic Center. So we upgraded the library so it's so it will not collapse in the event of a major earthquake, but the Civic Center, frankly, is doomed in its current state. And so this would seismically upgrade it and make it earthquake proof for the safety of our employees, for folks who are there, for everybody. So that's sort of a high level overview of the various projects. So I know you've heard a lot of different things in the media about different groups who are advocating for all sorts of different things, but this is where it ended up. So these are the numbers. It's not subject to change at this point, where it's headed to the ballot in the form that we're talking to you. So I think with that, I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes and turn it over to my colleagues. I think we're going with Virginia first.
Yeah,
And give them a chance just to chat a little bit about the perspective on where we're at with the bond.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a great rundown. It was a lot of work, several months, and it was really great to just sit here and listen to Mayor-elect Hoy give the rundown of all the work that who else was there? Chuck was there? Was that it?
Mhm.
Okay, the mayor was there. Sorry, first name basis with most people. So it was great to just get a rundown of all the work that we did. Really proud of what we've put forward, and I think it's a really great step for the community. And really good progress. Some of the things that we worked hard on, I think the 157 million for transportation is huge, and I'm really interested in transportation. And when it came forward, we had the full project from Retherford Drive was in there. One of the compromises that we made, Mickey Varney and I, and oh, Mickey was part of she came in late, yeah, when she was appointed, so she was there too. We worked to kind of make that a little bit more equitable, because the whole project itself, I believe, was 47 million. I'm looking at Peter down here. Yes, for the nod. And so we worked to find a compromise there so that it didn't take up almost a third of the budget, right? And so we came up with a good solution there that I think will be really helpful for the folks in West Salem and in Ward 1 in West Salem. And I'm really excited about that progress, knowing that there will be other sections of that to be built in the future. But I think this is a really good promise made, I think, on the part of the city and on the part of the council to the citizens of West Salem. And I think it will just really benefit that neighborhood. The other one that we worked hard on was getting some pots of money in there for pedestrian infrastructure. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with my ward, but Ward 1 has got probably some of the oldest sidewalks in the city. And then out in Jose's ward and Chris's ward, I think they're missing a lot of sidewalks that never were installed. And so setting aside big pots of money for us to be able to fix what's broken and put in what's missing is really key. And so I'm really proud of that work. Equity has always been really important to the council as a whole, and I think that really shines through when we look at the fire infrastructure that we're looking at, not only the equipment, but the stations. A while ago, the chief showed us a heat map of response times for the city, and it was really, really shocking to see. Some of the areas, especially in Northeast Salem, were double the amount of time that our goal is. Our goal is 5.5 minutes, and I think they were over 10 minutes in some of the areas was the response time. And so being able to look at this opportunity, set aside some funds in order to right that wrong and make sure that everybody in our city has access to reliable emergency services was, I think, really important on the work that we did there. And lastly, I too am really excited about the library and the housing options. I think those are going to be a really great investment in our city and in our future. So those are the things that I'm pretty excited about as we move forward. And I'll stop talking and allow for my counselor here to give his thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Virginia. Morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here. You know, when I first heard about this bond, I wasn't happy. You know, the amount seemed like a lot. You know, one of the, my thing has always been to try to reduce the cost of living in Salem. We talk about the cost of housing, but it's really the cost of living. And I see these cups of coffee, and not too long ago, I couldn't afford a cup of coffee. You know, so I know there's people like that today. I know there is. $5 makes a big difference in some people's life. You know, so I'm always trying to look for ways to not nickel and dime people, our own people. That's how we push them away. And then in a few years, our city looks different. What do we do? You know, but as the city kept going with the process, you know, we were there every step of the way. I realized that what they were trying to do is do the kind of things that some people did for us ahead of time. You know, when we go to Silver Creek, I'm thinking someone invested in this so we could enjoy it today. I mean, we're talking 50 years ahead. They were thinking of us. You know, so I keep that in mind as we're going through the process. And as they were asking neighbors, I realized that they were really taking into account the feedback they were getting from the neighborhood associations, the actual neighbors living there, the ones dealing with those busy streets, the ones dealing with the lack of sidewalks. I started to see that they actually took that into account. And what you have today is a lot different than what it was before. That's what I can promise you. You know, I tend to support it, but my main focus now is ensuring that it's Salem companies that get this work. You know, because if we're going to be paying for it, then we need that money to circulate as much as we can in our city. That way we can see the benefit. And I can tell people, I mean, it's sort of, I say it this way, but I don't care if it's John or Juan to get that business, but I want it to be Salem. Thank you very much. I wanted to leave plenty of time for question and answer.
Thanks, Jose, and thank you, Virginia. I'm not sure what happened to our colleague Trevor this morning. I know he intended to be here, but I'm not sure where he is.
No
So
response.
he's an ER doctor, and sometimes things happen that he doesn't have control over. So we'll give him a pass this morning. So what we tried to do just in this short amount of time is give you a brief overview of the bond, but we're happy to answer any questions in detail you have about anything that we talked about or anything related to the bond at all. So I don't know who, Tom, are you going to facilitate that part, or how's that going to?
I'll come in actually after we release all of our speakers, and I'll navigate the conversation with our membership.
Okay.
I'd like to do, Jeff, if I'm not mistaken, are we going to hear from staff, or are we?
They're not going to do an actual presentation. They're just available.
Supplemental?
They're filling all the details that we glossed over.
I do think it's important that we hear from staff a little bit on, Peter specifically on some of the street issues, as well as Chief Niblock on some fire issues. I do think that those are some key topics. Obviously, there's going to be some questions from the audience, and hopefully there are some questions. There's a lot to discuss here that needs to be kind of ferreted out. Please, Raquel.
Are we going to start with questions now, or did you want staff to?
I think it would be great if staff wants to just jump in, and we'll start with Peter. We'll kind of work back this way for a few minutes, and then we can go in with questions, if that's okay with everybody. Yep.
Okay, yeah, good morning, everyone. I'll be very brief because I think we went over the project list last time. But there are a couple of things that I think are important to consider. And one of the first big questions, I know it's a question that came up the last time we were here, is well, why this sort of multifaceted bond? You know, in the past we've done very specific, you know, a bond for fire, a bond for streets, a bond for, well, we've never had a bond for parks, but you know, and so on and so forth. You know, the idea of this multifaceted bond really came out of the strategic planning effort that Steve Powers kicked off when he first became city manager. And it was this idea that we needed to rationalize the city's capital program. So there's always projects that come up. They always need money. And one of the criticisms that we get a lot at the city is, well, you people are always in our pockets. You people are always asking for money. And it's true. I mean, we have a big infrastructure. We own, you know, billions of dollars worth of infrastructure that always needs improving and always needs maintaining. So the idea here is that we would, you know, come before the voters and say, look, this is what we need for the next 10 years. You know, so you know, we're going to come to you. You're going to give us permission to spend this money. It's not going to raise your taxes over what you're paying today. And for the next, it probably be more than 10 years, these projects, usually we save money. Project might take a little longer, so it might actually be longer than 10 years. We're not gonna come back to you and ask you for any more money. You know, these are the projects, we're gonna put them, the only thing that'll be left to do is kind of put them in order in the CIP. Where do they go? And you know, depending on how long they take to build. So I think that's an important consideration. I think that's something that came up last time that we didn't really talk about. So that was really the underlying reason behind it. It started years ago when we were doing the strategic planning to kind of go to this type of model so that so we could do that. Beyond that, the projects, I just want to reiterate that we use the term urban upgrade for projects. We do a lot of those kinds of projects with our bond issues. So that's basically streets that might be 2 lanes, no sidewalks, typically go to 3 lanes, 1 lane each direction, turn lane, bike lanes, curbs, sidewalk, streets, street lights. So that's so there's a lot of those kinds of projects. There's a lot of pavement repair and rehabilitation. Unfortunately, I've said this before, this group and many other groups, we don't get enough gas tax allocation to address major repavings. So we really rely on these bond issues to do that. So there's a whole list of pavement repair and rehabilitation that we need to do. We talked about Marine Drive. It's a good chunk of it. You know, we'd love to, you know, Marine Drive has been in the book since the 90s. It was actually first conceived when Wallace Road was being widened, if you were here that long ago, and the idea of putting in a median. And we actually foresaw, you know, talk about good planning. We actually foresaw that there was going to be all those apartments on the east side of Wallace Road, and all those people needed a way into, you know, what I refer to as downtown West Salem without having to get onto Wallace Road. And it would be that much harder now that there's going to be a median. So that was always the point of Marine Drive, and this first phase accomplishes that. So it will extend from where the development is today down into the downtown area, and then there's legs to be extended into the future. But it'll be a good first, a very substantial first phase of the project. A number of bike and ped improvements. And then on the sidewalks, you know, we had a change in policy years ago where years and years ago, we had the sidewalks have gone back and forth. It used to be that property owners took care of sidewalks. And then at some point, I've been here 27 years, so it predates me. There was a policy of, okay, the city's going to take care of sidewalks. And then at some point, we realized that we couldn't afford that anymore. So there was a change of policy again back when Janet Taylor was mayor of, okay, we're going to get the side responsibility back to property owners, but not before we corrected any existing problems. And so we have been at that for many, many years to fix the sidewalks, to be able to return them to property owner responsibility. It has been decades. It will be many more decades. We spend a couple of $1 million a year, and this amount of money will not finish what we need to do. So this is just a steady, you know, grinding along as we make the repairs and the things that need to be done. We're very proud of our street trees. Street trees are very hard on sidewalks, so that will be a continuous issue beyond that. So this is a nice chunk of money to continue to repair sidewalks, augment what we have, and do some missing gaps. We've done missing gaps for a number of years. We have typically stressed access to schools, access to parks, access to commercial areas, or if there are known areas where there are people with disabilities, with mobility issues that need access. So we kind of focus on those areas first to be able to install sidewalks. Also want to talk real quick. So, you know, poor parks, we've never had a bond issue for parks. So this is a real nice opportunity to do some improvements. All of the improvements, frankly, all of the improvements in transportation and in parks are all consistent with infrastructure master plans. So everything has had a public vetting. Everything that's in this bond has had a public vetting in the past. It's been sitting in the unfunded list in master plans and now have been brought forward. So there's a nice list of improvements within what was designated. And I think that's it. It says fire engines on this next page.
Oh,
So it's all yours.
There's my cue. Well, thank you very much for having us back again. I think, like you said, we were here in June, so I will be brief as well. Just touch on a couple of things that the councilors mentioned. Our local adopted standard for response is 5.5 minutes at 85% of the time. Last year, we met that 61.6% of the time, which last time I translated into people, that's 5,126 individuals who had a critical emergency last year and did not get a 5.5 minute response. That number will increase as we move forward, as our call volume continues to go up. We haven't really added resources since 2010. Our call volume's gone up 80% since then. It's going to continue to go up. In 2 years, 2 or 3 years, that 5,000 number will be 9,000. So that's the rate of climb that we're experiencing right now. I say that to talk about the 2 new station locations. So we have a station on the Chemeketa Community College campus that's been there 30 years. It's not our station, it's their station. We occupy it. We operate a fire engine out of there. Really not positioned. It's not even in the city limits. It's not really positioned to serve Northeast Salem like we would like to see it served. And when the counselor mentioned the heat maps, red is a bad color. That's over 8.5 minutes. That whole section of town is basically red, meaning we don't get to emergencies there less than 8.5 minutes, pretty much ever. So that's a significant impact in that portion of the community. These maps are on our website if you want to go dig around and look at them and look at the transition. I think they're from 2012 till now. You can see the changing color. Green is good, red is bad. And so there's a key that's attached to that, and you can research that. Station 8, building that new Station 8 with this bond money, we already have the people to staff that station. So it would be making a move from apparatus and personnel to that new station, and we just need to build the station. So that would better take care of the northeast part of town. Southeast would be located out somewhere in the Mill Creek area. We have over 2,000 calls for service a year out there. That's over an 8.5 minute response time as well. Can't get here from there. It's point A to point B. The closest station, 10, 9 on Battle Creek. It's just too far of a drive. So we would look at adding a station out there. That station, we do not have people to staff, so we would have to add revenue to be able to staff that fire station. It would take 12 people to staff that station 24 hours a day. And I'll touch on our equipment real quick. We are really, we had calculated a 14-year life expectancy for these trucks. We're starting our 16th year. They are nearing 500,000 miles, equivalency miles for motor hours. They look really good on the outside because we take care of them. We do take care of them on the inside as well, but they're mechanical, and mechanical things break down eventually. We're starting to see motor failures, transmission issues. We've replaced several motors already in the ladder trucks. It's only a matter of time before the engines start having motor issues. We have 4 reserves. So when I get to the point when I have 4 reserves out of service, I'm closing a station. That's how critical we are. And we are literally stealing parts off of one fire engine to put another fire engine in service. So not a good place to be. They're beyond their mechanical life expectancy. And the sad news is that if we ordered them today, it would be 2 years before we got the new trucks. So we're talking, this fleet's going to be at least 18 years old before we replace it, and that's best case scenario. So it's critical that we get this bond passed in November to be able to replace this fleet. We're in a bad spot, so I'll leave it at that.
I'll speak just really briefly about polling and public sentiment. We've done statistically valid polling twice on this. The first was in January, the second was in May. Both had very positive results. The first polling came in at 49%, and then when we explained that this would go into effect without an increase in your property tax rate, the numbers changed to 60%, which is really good. That was repeated again in May, where we hit that 60% mark again. And in terms of project priorities, the community response prioritized the streets and sidewalk improvements and fire equipment as the top priority. Their middle tier was the parks, the land acquisitions for future libraries, affordable housing, and fire stations, and then the cybersecurity and IT infrastructure piece. And then and the lowest tier was the seismic upgrades at the city.
Perfect, thank you. So at this point, we have about 30 minutes-ish for a Q&A from the audience to staff and to counselors. I think that we really need to take the 30 minutes to really dive into some questions and try and ferret out what those answers are and how that looks to this group. So Raquel, you had your hand up prior. I want to make sure to go back to you quickly if you have a question. You bet.
So, you touched on prioritization, and that was for the public one. How does the city plan to prioritize the projects?
I'm going to let Peter answer that because a lot of it has to do with timeline for designing projects and how they would implement. Some will be in a design phase, some are on the shelf ready to go.
But in terms of fire,
Oh,
You know,
Mhm.
you've got numerous things
mhm.
outlined, and knowing that the money is, you know, coming in a stream, and your output can only be so much.
Sure.
here. It is our.
Gotcha. Fire's number one.
I guess that's.
Yes, because we've got the lead time. There's how long of a lead time?
2 years.
2 years. So the getting that acquisition underway would be first thing.
We're ready to order them. Have been for a while.
So we would start with that, and then in terms of the next processes and what would be prioritized, some of these projects are going to take quite a bit of lead time just to design and develop, like seismic improvements to Civic's going to take some time. We've got a lot of our transportation projects that are going to take, like Marine Drive, you know, that's going to take quite a bit of lead time to get that designed. Others are things that we can drop in and start addressing pretty quickly. Things like the cybersecurity improvements, you know, they can get started on that sooner than later. Land acquisition, we could start working on that process of determining where we're going to site facilities and start the acquisition process. I think some of the parks improvements, so you're talking about playground upgrades, those could be pretty quick out of the gate. So just on the staff and our implementation side, that's how that would work. Then there will be another process where it will be working with council on the policy level and how council wants to prioritize the different segments within the other piece of it, you know, in terms, so you could prioritize a road project as being very high priority, but it could be 3 years or 4 years before it happens. So those two have to be balanced.
the other part of that is that we also have to do projects as the money becomes available, because this isn't going to be a $300 or $300 million available right off the bat. It's rolled on. So we haven't really had an analysis of that yet that I recall, at least, where like what's the timing for those other things rolling off so we can roll new things on. So there's kind of like 3 different moving parts. And so we haven't quite gotten there yet in terms of what that order actually looked like.
We have a work session that is scheduled later this month, and we will be talking a little bit more about how that staging and rollout will work at that work session.
Thank you, Raquel. Lyle, please.
So we're running into projects that were at the design phase 2 years ago and they go to construction today. You're running into 40% overruns in costs. Does that take into consideration of these dollars?
Yes, we, all of the cost estimates were, we did them all to a midpoint of inflation. So over 10 years, we inflated everything to 10 years and then rolled it back. So on average, everything's inflated to 5 years. So some projects will be early and save money, some projects will be later and cost more. So on average, we would hope that things would work out. Now, this is a weird thing to say. As owners, if we're lucky, we're going to get a massive recession, right after this thing passes, because then projects will be cheaper and we'll be able to do even more projects. You know, that's really what happened to us in 2008. Where we were able to do 40 more projects, because everything was significantly cheaper than we had anticipated. So as an owner, as a community, inflation, recession is terrible. As an infrastructure owner during construction, it's a great thing. So, but yes, we have accounted.
That's not an official position of the city. That's
I was thinking, bite that tongue.
staff, not a council policy.
Oh, right. So Courtney just whispered in my ear, not that the commissioner had this question, but for the 08 bond, I think it was 88% of the expenditures were local contractors and consultants. So we're blessed in our community to have excellent, at least from the public works side, you know, the bread and butter work. So paving, pipes, parks. We got great local contractors. We tend to award a lot of them, and engineering staff, private consultants. So 88% was what we had for the old bond, and we would expect something similar.
And we've recently reworked our procurement process to really prioritize local. That's happening in our like in our public works building that we're currently constructing, that sort of thing. So yeah.
I got a question on here from Director Martin. How many affordable units are planned for this sites for future development, branch libraries and affordable housing? $7.5 million.
We have not gotten to that level of detailed planning yet.
This is for property acquisition. It's we don't know what the sites will be yet, so we can't project how many units would be on each one of those. What we can find, what we, you know, all those kinds of things.
Then I got another one here from Barry Nelson. What is the estimate for ongoing additional operating / maintenance costs may be added as a result of improvements / investments, and how will these operating costs be met?
So that question, I think, is dependent on the area of investment, because some of these will be cost savings. Some of the improvements to Civic, to our IT and cybersecurity systems, you know, those are going to add efficiency. Parks, and a lot of the road work too will add efficiencies. Where we run into the ongoing costs is largely going to be with like acquiring land for future libraries or fire stations. And at this point in time, we're looking at just land banking for the future, and we have not addressed what the future operating costs would be, but looking at buying the land now before land prices increase even further, knowing that it will be a future need we'll have to deal with it at some point.
Amy, you had a question.
With respect to the investment in affordable housing, it's all said and done, it's projects completed. What you have expected the city to have received? What we
More affordable housing. More apartments that are at a rate that people of lower incomes can afford. More units.
and they would be at that rate because we subsidize the purchase of the land.
Because there's two different pots of money there. One is the $10 million gap funding. That would be directly to the developers. Then it would help keep and they would make a commitment to keep the rents lower to allow it to be at the affordable level. The other ones would be where we would be purchasing land. We would be the developer, or a private development company would come in, and as a result of that, tax abatement and other things, we would enter into an agreement with them where they keep the rates at an affordable level.
We have some sort of standards about what is retail market value.
Yes. It's not relative to retail market value. It's relative to income. If we're talking, when we say affordable housing, there's like housing that's affordable, or there's like what I call capital A affordable, which has to meet the HUD definition of affordability, where you'd be able to use one of the Salem Housing Authority vouchers to be able to rent. And that's what we're talking. When we're talking about affordable housing in this sense, That's the kind of housing that we're talking about, that. Mhm.
It's generally at 80% or less of the average median income.
Yeah,
It doesn't necessarily mean section 8, though. It's either
Doesn't-
80% or 60% of the median county income. Is how that's calculated.
Do we have an expectation for number of units?
we don't know yet because we don't know what the land will be, that'll be available to us, but we're gonna maximize that for sure. We have some, yeah.
I have a question here. I have not heard the answer on how we're going to fund the additional fire station staff that's needed. If the full rate of fire is a priority, why was
So this is money for capital projects, so we can't pay for staffing out of this bond. We can only pay for things. That's just the way the rules work with it. And so what we're trying to do is we absolutely believe that we need another fire station. That's why we reopened one of the West Salem fire stations has been closed for a number of years. And we're positioning ourselves to be able to get to a point where we can fund that. Fund the staffing for that additional fire station. Like the chief said, one of the stations, it's actually a move. So the staff is ready today to move into it. We just need the building and the land. So we'll have to come up with, I think he said 12, staffing for 12 new positions. And over the course of this process, we'll be working on how to do that.
I'd like to just quickly go back to Amy's question about the allocating 7.5 million is not a lot in context of acquisition of dirt. If you say you need 3 acres and you're spent $10 a square foot, right there's a couple $1,000,000 just for the dirt for one site. It doesn't include any building at that point or construction. So the 7.5 million is from a commercial real estate perspective, not a high number. So I just wanted to kind of jump in on that. Yeah.
Here, so I wasn't able to be here in June. Can you describe what kind of improvements from McGillcrest area? I know it's urban renewal area, and for projects, just to jumpstart that.
No, this is to complete it. So we have, we're in right-of-way acquisition for the 22nd Street realignment. So that will be under construction here very soon. And we have the urban renewal monies. So this would complete it. So it's been designed. It has federal permits because we've been chasing federal money for years and unfortunately have been unsuccessful. So it will be 4 lanes. So 2 lanes eastbound, 1 lane westbound, and a turn lane between 22nd and 25th, and then 3 lanes from 22nd to the railroad, bikes, curbs, or sidewalks, curbs, bike lanes, and street lighting for the remainder. So, yeah, finally.
And in the meantime, we're going to continue to pursue the federal funding, and if that should come in, that would free up money for other projects. Because that's a shovel ready project. I talked to Senator Wyden and staff just yesterday again about McGillcrest, in fact. So it's still top of mind, and they are the ones that brought it up. So I know it's still top of mind for them, and we're hopeful that in this new reconciliation project that there actually might be some funding available for it.
That's great.
And then there's an adjunct to that because Pringle is also on the list. So Pringle from Verona to McGillcrest is also on. So that will also get an improvement. And that's, I mean, I remember that road being, when I was taking my kids to Leslie Middle School. Well, my daughter will be 30 in October, so that gives you kind of a sense of how long ago that was. I drive through there and, there's people in apartments, there's people coming to work, there's people going to work, there's deep ditches. So to finally be able to fund, that project, I don't live there, but I remember vividly how horrible that stretch of road is, how unsafe. So to be able to bring that together and so have that system in that area of town completed is going to be fantastic.
Raquel? And then, yeah.
Just a quick note on the new federal money for infrastructure. Everything has to be made in America, and it's an issue that has come up that we don't make certain things in America. And so it's all made in American parts. So I be very careful around that moving forward. And we know that the federal argument, we just looking at that, but it's. Right?
Raquel, so it's so funny that you mentioned that. When we were building the Peter Courtney Bridge, the rods ended up being, they were made in America, they were threaded in Canada, and that disqualified them, and we had a huge issue. So we are well aware of those rules and have suffered through, even just by the Canadians just touching it made them un-American.
Please.
Question in regards to public awareness. Seems like the city is very invested, many of our local agencies are very invested, businesses are very invested in making sure our voters know what they're voting for, how this is affecting, et cetera. What is planned in terms of public awareness, either by the city or whoever else is involved? Get the word out there so that people know how shocking the numbers are for fire, for instance, so that they're have a fire department, showing up.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking it. And this is where the staff kind of has to step away and the council has to take over because of advocacy. And so we'll be running a public campaign. We'll be hopefully raising enough funds to engage someone to run a campaign for us, and we're working on that currently. So yeah, there will be mailers and the whole, the typical bond campaign that'll be going on. And that's, like I said, that's where council has to sort of take the lead. And because staff, once we refer it to the ballot, they can't really be involved in they can't be involved in advocacy at all. So yeah, that's the plan, is to really go full court press on this. We have, like I said, we have unanimous anticipate the council being 9 plus some of our newer councilors taking office in January, being full-on advocates and being out there and being sort of the face of this with the public. And yeah, so we're working on finalizing those talking points and that sort of thing based on a lot of the polling feedback we get from groups like this, that sort of thing, and just getting out there and really talking about it and getting this thing across the finish.
Can I also add that I think it's up to, neighborhood groups and up to folks like you all, if you are convinced and excited about it, talking to your neighbors and your friends and your family and being out there on our social media feeds, really talking about the infrastructure that's needed, the investment that's needed, and your full support behind it, because we're just 9 people, the council. And as much energy and enthusiasm that we all have for this and belief in this, we're just 9 people in a big city. And so I think it's going to take everybody stepping up, those of us who are really excited and just talking about it in real positive ways and finding the things in it that you're passionate about and talking about those is really key. So I know that I have the council, we're all together on this. But I also am excited to see who in the community leaders that we can bring in and have us help us get this across the finish line.
And we really need to remember this is an investment, and this is a long-term investment in the community, just like the 2008 measure was. This is, we're with some of these future planning things that we're doing, this really is an investment in our infrastructure for the future. And so it's critical that we get it. Yeah.
If it doesn't, I'm frankly shocked that you got 60% in the current economic environment. But if it doesn't pass, what you kind of need, because we have some urgent needs in the fire department, cybersecurity.
Yeah, we have a variety of plan Bs that we'll have to, we haven't made any decisions in terms of them, but we have potential plan Bs out there that we'll be looking at what we do in the meantime. But just 1 second. But historically, the Salem voters have been really supportive of our bonds. The school district has been successful. We've been successful with our police station, with the library size and upgrade. Folks have been really supportive, and so we're hopeful that's going to continue. Obviously, just to get to the specifics of your question, fire equipment is critical. It's a critical. It's not a nice to have. It's critical need.
So she asked what your priority was, or what would your next plan be? For question that you asked, right?
In terms of the fire equipment,
Anything.
If it fails, we're in an economic situation we're never. this fails, what?
Right. So we haven't made that decision yet. So I can't say, oh, this is it because I'm one guy, right? I'm one vote. We're gonna figure out a way to buy the equipment, whether that's just some sort of lease option where we don't need a bond for just the equipment, just the fire equipment. That's an option that we have. Potentially we could go out just for a fire bond in May. We could go out for the whole package again in May. I mean, there are a variety of options available to us and we're discussing what would be the strongest strategy. I can't tell you which one it will be again, because we haven't made that decision, but those are the kinds of conversations we're having right now. Because we don't want to, we want to be prepared for the work.
What's the plan if, let's say that the bond does pass, we get all these things that, are we gonna continue every 10, 15, 20 years to buy fire equipment on a bond? Or are we actually gonna start a budget to buy fire? Have new fire stations, things like this? I mean, you can't get fire trucks for 2 years, right? And you have almost half a million miles with the equivalent, 500,000 miles on these engines, things like that. I operate a very small company here in town. I have 15 semi trucks. I have trucks with well over 1 million miles on, some of them approaching 2 million miles. Okay. As a taxpayer, for you to come to me and say, hey, we need money for our fire trucks, I'm on board, right? I want the best, biggest, baddest fire truck to come to my kids' emergency if they have one. But it's also a little bit of a slap in the face because we're all struggling to maintain the equipment we have today. Okay. And there hasn't been a plan in place since day one that the new fire trucks were bought in whatever year that was 10, 15 years ago. It's like, okay, well, we need to start putting money in place now to purchase new ones when they've run their life, right? And now we're 2 years away. If we ordered them today from getting them. Maybe we need to start looking at, there's a term called PCR, which is planned component replacement or rebuild. Are we saying, hey, at 400,000 miles on a fire truck, we take it to Pierce Manufacturing Eugene or KMC, whoever built the trucks. Hey, you know what? Go through it from stem to stern, and we're going to replace the components. Okay, the engine, the transmission, fuel lines, electrics, whatever it may be. And if it's 60% of the cost of new, then that makes good financial sense for us. Are we evaluating those types of things with this new plan of not necessarily a new plan, but thinking forward into the future? Are those things in place at all? I know Marion County's recently wanted new ambulances. And they found some good used ones somewhere at Chassis, and they're taking I don't know what you call it, but I'll say the box, right? And put it on these used chassis because they're less miles and it's more cost efficient for them to do that. I thought that's a great idea. I have no idea if there's a used market or not. I don't know. And if we did, would it be a good purchase? I don't know that, but I think these are things that we need to discuss because the issues of fire truck, that didn't happen this year, right? We've known since the day we bought the last one, that we're going to need at some point new fire trucks.
So there's a lot to unpack there, but
Yeah,
I'll do my best. I'll start with the plan. So I've worked in organizations before this one that had equipment replacement fund, and they paid into the fund and they built the fund up and they bought the trucks one at a time when they needed them. There's lots of different ways to do it. This community over the last probably 30 years has bonded every 15 to 18 years to be able to replace their fleet. There are advantages to replacing the fleet all at once. They're all the same. I can move a firefighter from truck 1 to truck 6 and all the buttons are the same. They drive the same. And for the mechanics, I can stock one water pump because it fits all the trucks. There's huge advantages there to scale. As far as rebuilding, let me stop there. I'll go back and talk about. So when we did our last bond, that question came up. Why don't you set money aside to buy trucks? That's an option. That's not an option we've looked at. We've looked at the leasing option. We've looked at leasing. And quite frankly, with the miles that we're putting on our trucks now in the short period of time, the last fleet was 18 years old when we replaced it, had about 400,000 miles on it. We're at 500,000 now. We're 16 years old. So that's going to increase exponentially as we move forward. So our fleet, while we're going to squeeze 18 years out of this one, we probably won't get 18 out of the next one if our call volume keeps going up. So a 10-year lease might be something we look at. You use the truck in the early phases of its life where there's less maintenance required. First 5 to 6 years, it's on warranty. And then you've got smaller costs to keep the fleet running, and then you sell the fleet back and you lease a new one. I want to say about $2.5 million a year we can lease the whole fleet. So we have looked at those things. Originally, we intended to go to bond in 2020. There were some things that happened that prevented that, and then a pandemic happened, and so there's some things that are outside of our control, and we're trying to find the path out now. We have evaluated that stuff, doesn't mean that we won't, if the bond is successful and we replace this fleet, that we couldn't look at, hey, next time we're gonna do this. I mean, it's really a policy decision. But we have looked at that kind of stuff. As far as the rebuild goes, we have rebuilt some rigs. What we find is, we just had an ambulance that destroyed its motor. To rebuild that ambulance was like $180,000. We could buy a new one for $220,000. So are you rebuilding a 20-year-old ambulance with other things that can go wrong? In 20 years, there's a lot of changes in technology, lighting, all those kind of things. And so we have looked at that too. We have not looked at it for fire trucks. Most municipal departments our size use the truck for 12 to 14 years, and then they replace it. So with a new truck.
That rebuild an engine and an ambulance for $180,000.
It was called a rebuild. So it was like you were talking about, transmission, motor.
Oh,
Just take the box off and yeah, all the components. Yeah. So you keep the box basically.
Drive around the city, and this is unfortunate for you, but you see a lot of brand new city vehicles, right? So you say, look, why have we bought brand new city pickups and other types of transportation for city employees when we obviously have a big need for fire trucks? I guess the point of that question is, it seems to me like maybe we ought to prioritize how we're spending our money a little better. And you're gonna, if this passes, you're gonna get $300 million. Can we be a little more careful how we spend that money, right? Because it's a lot of money.
We don't buy our fire trucks out of the fleet fund. So those vehicles are
Let's take the
separate.
umbrella.
Yeah,
right, of all
yeah.
the money that the city gives taxpayers.
Right.
It seems to me like that can be managed a little bit better, right? If I'm driving down the road and I'm seeing brand new utility Salem, we have 16-year-old fire trucks. I got a question for the fire.
So at the risk of sounding like a bureaucrat, that government budgeting, the rest of the fleet is on, payment and replacement. But for example, a lot of the fleet that you see out there is utility fleet. Well, utility money can't be spent on fire trucks. So it's really difficult. So it would only be those vehicles. So police cars could be exchanged for fire trucks, for example. Parks vehicles could be exchanged for fire trucks, but not water, sewer, storm vehicles. So it gets a little more complicated, what's out there and what can be done. It's by law, we can't do it that way. So that's just an explanation.
Understood.
I think that's a great point. Let's grab, I know there was a hand up. Now your question was?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you know.
The way the police bond was handled in terms of the contractors who were hired somewhat left a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of our voters. There a lot being on the police foundation. Lot. And so my big concern is public awareness. I mean, part of what I do for a job, but it's also what I hear a lot from the public as I get so much. So my first question was about public hearing, and also with the voter turnout in May being, I don't know, less than 55%, maybe 60%. I'm highly concerned that we put all of our eggs in this one basket. I'm really glad that someone asked a potential question, because I'm greatly concerned about the fire department numbers, the safety, public safety issues. Cybersecurity would be detrimental to the city if it's not, seriously. And so, I mean, I just, yeah.
So the primary election, actually, the voter turnout was pretty high for a primary election. And in November, which is a general election, we have the governor on the ballot. We expect actually quite pretty good voter turnout in November. That's one of the reasons that we chose November. So, but you're right, we do have to get out there and educate the public for sure.
So along those lines, just couple quick questions. We had mentioned how some bonds are rolling off. This would be rolling on. Is there what I had heard that there's not a specific knowledge of what is rolling off versus what's rolling on. Did I misunderstand that?
We do have Josh online.
Yeah.
If we could pull him up and have him speak to that.
Sure.
Are you there, Josh?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Great.
Josh, did you hear the
So
question?
I did hear the question. Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to answer. Sorry, I couldn't be there in person. So we currently have several outstanding bonds. If you look at your tax statement for your house, you'll see just one line. It says Salem bonds. That's made up of the library, police station, and then we did a refunding for the streets and bridges bond a couple years ago. So that streets and bridges bond is winding down, that refunding. So we have a planned spend down for that debt service. And then that's really what allows us to have that that capacity to bond for this new issuance. We've modeled it a few different ways, but the one that's working right now is basically we issue a $300 million bonds, 3 series, 3 years apart. So one right away where we get the fire equipment purchased. 3 years later, we do another 100 million, and then another 3 years, we do another 100 million. So three issuances. But it fits really nicely, even with the updated interest estimates. We did a recalculation here a couple months ago, just with the inflation. I was getting a little concerned that we wouldn't be able to fit it in with our capacity, but it does work at this point. And we have a little bit of room if interest rates do go up a little higher. I hope that answers the question.
So Josh, in other words, what's coming off when there's 100 million going on every 3 years, in theory, the 100 million that goes on, in other words, you're saying there's 100 million that comes off. Because the comment was made that our taxes will not go up, which I find difficult to.
Tax rate will not go up.
Tax rate will not go up. And I find that a little difficult to wrap my mind around when we're talking 300 million, because back to the previous comment that when the police station and the school bond passed, there were a ton of people that came to me, being commercial real estate, saying my taxes went up 16%. What in the heck? Like, it was a huge difference. Now that was a different scenario, different conversation, but I just want to make sure that everyone's hearing that taxes will not go up. Tax rate.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to clarify that. It's nuanced, but basically what we're talking about is really isolated. On your tax statement, it says Salem bonds, all the Salem capital bonds in one line. We can't control anything else on your tax statement. So there could be other bonds that other municipalities or government agencies issue. So we're only talking about that one line. One of the reasons it fits is that our debt service, when we issue a bond, isn't always flat. So it's not like, say, your mortgage, you have a flat payment for 30 years. In some cases, depending on what the market looks like, it might have a higher debt service payment in the beginning of the bond and then decrease over time, which is why, 100 million bond coming off allows for the capacity for a new $300 million bond coming on the tax rolls. And then as far as your taxes increasing, you're statutorily limited to a 3% increase in your assessed value for your house. So what I would expect, if the Salem bonds $1.20 per thousand, your taxes will go up 3% for that $1.20. That's the increase you'd see. So your tax rate is the same, but the value of your house is going to go up 3%. It's not the real market value. It's not what you could sell it for. It's just that 3% increase. That's the tax increase you could expect.
Thank you. Going back to the comment about rolling on, and then we're probably gonna have to wrap up so we can have some internal conversation. But what's rolling on, we're hearing that there's 100 million every 3 years. So I'm assuming right out of the gate, 100 million is going on. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding? Josh, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry. That's how we're modeling it currently. We have a little flexibility to move that around. We're currently looking at some cash flow models for projects. We have a couple internal meetings to talk about that, and then we have a work session with council scheduled, so I don't want to get ahead of that work. But with that's the current scenario that we're looking at, and it works pretty nicely. A lot of these projects, you know, a lot of design work up front that we need to pay for it, but the bulk of the expense is the construction that happens a few years into the bond.
So in theory, with this 100 million that rolls on the first 3 years, fire's taken care of and some other stuff. Is that
Correct.
what I'm hearing? Okay, great.
The fire equipment is gonna be the first thing we purchase. I mean, that's just,
Gotcha.
that's a.
Jeff, real quick.
Yeah, please.
Okay. I wanted to echo some of the sentiments from the corner of the room over there. Jose, you mentioned it too. And Peter, I don't mean to beat you up about this. I don't think you're deserving of being up about this. Maybe you are, I don't know. But when you, in terms of local contractors, right? We spoke about this in June, you and I a little bit. You know, if the stat you provide is 88% of the time you use local contractors. If the one time that stands out in the community's mind, which the last one I think seems to be ruffling feathers, is a police station, you don't use a local contractor for that. 100% of the time you fail. If that's what stands out in your mind, 100% of the time the city failed. And again, I don't know that you're the guy that's taking much of this or there's other people. I think it's something very important. That 80% of the time is a good stat, but the one time that stands out in everyone's mind, it was an outside of the state contractor, which JE does what it really is. You failed 100% of the time. So I think it's very important that if this does pass and you are going out for bid, that, you know, there's preferential treatment in some sort, right? Legally and all that with local contractors. I think that's very.
Selfishly, one last question, Peter, before you get going. You talked about Marine Drive. Full disclosure, on the West Salem Advisory Board for Urban Renewal and West Salem resident. Marine Drive, when we're talking about Marine Drive, this first phase of Marine Drive, what street to what street is that?
It's
Harriet,
Sorry.
second to Harriet. Isn't it second to Harriet?
yes, so Herod on the north, and because then the last extension is over to Riverbend Road.
Yeah.
Is, you know, really undevelopable, just makes a connection. And the southern connection is the loop that would connect it to Wallace Road, to Glen Creek Road. Right.
Oh, it's
Those are the legs that are not part of the project. So
Harriet to Tabin.
so,
Sorry, Tabin, not second.
Tabin.
Tabin.
yeah.
Harriet to
It'll
Tabin.
connect to Tabin, and then Tabin then connects down, or it connects to that Fifth Avenue, and then that makes the connection down to Tabin, and then on the north end to Herod.
Okay.
So the entire project for Marine Drive that we funded was 47 million.
That was our estimate.
What is the dollar?
27 million.
So a little over half.
23.5.
Be exact.
I have the spreadsheet right here.
Exactly half of the project is. What will the voters see when that is? What does half of a project look like? I understand where it will be seen. Is there front-loaded costs, like to get the other half done, you have to do?
Yeah, now this will be a complete project. It'll be a completely usable street. It'll make connections. It'll connect there's little chunks that are built. So it'll connect those chunks. What they'll see on the north side is it'll come to a dead end, but that's the piece north of where there's development. So that's when it rolls kind of outside of the UGB to connect to Riverbend Road. So that would be a nice future connection. And to the south, it's the planned kind of loop around so that it's between the park and the existing development, so that it would make the connection down to Glen Creek Road. But there will be that connection down Fifth that gets you to Tabin, that then gets you to the Roth's parking lot and you know, the rest of that development. So for motorists, for bicyclists, for pedestrians, they'll have a complete street to be able to use, to be able to make those connections from those residential developments on the north down to downtown West City.
I think we want to allow Mayor-elect to close us out here, and then we're going to release. What I would ask for would be a counselor of this group, because we know the staff can't advocate. Tell us clearly what you would like ask of the Salem.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank you all for hearing us today. It's really important that we're out and talk about the details of this. We would love to have your support in this bond measure. If you would take a position and support this. Like I said, we're getting ready to run a public campaign, and to have your support would be important to us. So that's my ask.
Okay. Well, I'd like to just thank everyone for being here, counselors, staff, being here, giving us another opportunity to have this conversation. And with that, we will.
Good job.